The invitation for Adam's 40th birthday party came in the mail one Wednesday morning, tucked between a stack of flyers and my monthly bank statement. I almost didn't notice it. A cream envelope, thick and expensive, with a gold seal and my address written in the neat, looping handwriting that always made me think of my mother's careful penmanship. Inside, the card shimmered faintly in the morning sun. There was Adam's name in grand, swirling letters and a date for a Saturday evening in early spring, the party set at my parents' home. At the bottom, a line read, "We hope you can join us for this special occasion." But where my name should have been Evelyn, there was only a blank space. No greeting. Not even a printed "and guest." It shouldn't have surprised me. I had come to expect omissions, large and small, over the years, but this one stung more than I wanted to admit. I turned the card over in my hands, feeling its weight, and remembered all the other gatherings, Easters, Thanksgivings, even last year's 4th of July cookout, when I hovered near the kitchen doorway, watching my family from the periphery. Always the observer, never the main event. It wasn't that anyone said I didn't belong. It was more subtle than that, a seat left empty beside mine, a family photo taken when I was fetching drinks, my name missing from group texts. I'd learned to swallow the feeling, to tell myself it didn't matter. But staring at this invitation, I felt that old ache bloom in my chest. I spent the rest of the morning debating whether to go. If I skipped the party, it would only confirm what they already believed, that I didn't care, that I held myself apart. But showing up, putting on a smile, pretending not to notice the small slights, it felt like another kind of defeat. I opened my closet, scanning rows of carefully pressed blouses and simple dresses, all in muted colors. I chose a navy wrap dress, the one that always made me feel quietly put together, and slipped on my favorite pearl earrings, nothing flashy, but a nod to the woman I still hoped to be. The day of the party, I stopped at a little stationery store on South Congress and picked out a monogrammed pen set for Adam. It was the sort of gift I imagined someone might keep on their desk for years, practical but a touch personal. I had it wrapped in brown paper and tied with blue ribbon. The cashier wished me a good evening, and for a moment, I almost turned back, almost decided not to go after all. But something in me pressed forward, a stubborn need to be seen, even if it was only by the neighbor's dog barking at my car as I pulled into my parents' driveway. Their house looked just as I remembered it, modest but immaculately kept, with the porch swing freshly painted and solar lights glowing along the walkway. I could smell pecan pie wafting from the kitchen, the scent mingling with fresh-cut grass from the neighbor's lawn. Stepping onto the porch, I took a steadying breath. Gladys, our elderly neighbor, was already there, fussing with a bouquet of wildflowers. She smiled at me with the warmth I always wished for from my own family. "Evelyn, honey, I brought you some of my lemon bars. You know how your mother never puts enough zest in hers." She winked, slipping a foil-wrapped package into my hand before I could protest. Before I could knock, the door swung open and my mother stood framed in the hallway, her eyes lighting up just enough to be polite. "Oh, you made it," she said, her smile tight at the edges. She took the gift, barely glancing at it before setting it on a pile with the others. Inside, the house was buzzing. Frank, my dad, was holding court near the fireplace, deep in conversation with Adam and two of his golfing buddies. Becky flitted from room to room, a glass of white wine in hand, stopping only to whisper something into Mom's ear or to hug a guest she hadn't seen in months. The living room sparkled with fairy lights strung across the ceiling, and the dining table groaned under the weight of familiar dishes, brisket glistening in its pan, deviled eggs dusted with paprika, bowls of potato salad, and, of course, two pecan pies cooling near the window. I hovered in the doorway, scanning the room for a familiar face. Most of the guests were neighbors or old friends from Adam's college days, and the few who recognized me waved politely before drifting back into conversation. Becky sidled up beside me, perfume sweet and sharp. "Did you see who Adam invited?" she whispered, nodding toward a striking woman by the mantel. "That's Rachel, you remember, his high school flame. Bet Mom's hoping for a little romantic reunion." She laughed, her voice low and knowing, and for a second, I wondered if she actually wanted me to feel like an outsider. When it was time to take seats for dinner, Mom called out names from a list, her voice brisk and clear. Adam and Becky, of course, were at the main table, alongside their partners and a handful of out-of-town relatives. My own name didn't appear until the end, Evelyn, +1 followed by a pause. Mom motioned me toward a smaller table by the kitchen, already half filled with late arrivals and younger cousins. My place card rested among mismatched napkins, the words +1 typed neatly underneath. I sank into the chair, acutely aware of the laughter spilling from the main table. From where I sat, I could see Adam, his face lit up as he recounted a story about a high school baseball game, Frank slapping him on the back. Becky snapped photos on her phone, pausing only to show Linda a particularly flattering shot. No one seemed to notice the empty seat beside me. The kitchen door swung open and shut as servers bustled in and out, refilling drinks and carrying empty platters. Occasionally, a whiff of cinnamon or roast beef would drift my way, mingling with the scent of cleaning polish and gardenia from a vase on the counter. A few guests offered polite small talk. Gladys stopped by to pat my hand, promising to save me a slice of pie. But mostly I sat quietly, folding and refolding my napkin into little triangles, watching the swirl of family from a safe distance. After dinner, Mom brought out the signature dishes for dessert. The pecan pie, perfectly golden, was sliced with ceremonial care. The deviled eggs, topped with just the right kick of mustard, were praised by an uncle I barely remembered. I listened to the chorus of approval, the easy banter. My own compliments went unheard, lost in the clatter of forks and the pop of champagne. As the evening wore on, I found myself gazing at the doorway, wondering how long I needed to stay before slipping out would be noticed. Would anyone miss me before the cake was served? Would Adam look up from the head table and realize I was gone? Or would my absence be just another detail, quietly swept aside like an unfinished plate of brisket? I sat there, surrounded by the familiar tastes and smells of home, feeling the weight of everything unsaid. And for the first time, I wondered, not just if I belonged, but if I truly wanted to anymore. I'd barely settled into my chair at the little kitchen-side table before the full strangeness of the party washed over me. It wasn't the noise that came in waves, rising and falling with laughter and the clink of ice in glasses. It was the fact that, for all the familiar faces around me, I felt invisible. The refrigerator behind me hummed steadily, and every few minutes, the swinging door to the kitchen would whoosh open, letting out a waft of oven heat and the rich scent of brisket, then slap shut again. My seat wobbled just a little, and every time a server hurried past, the table trembled. It was like sitting on the edge of a carousel, all motion and noise, but no part of the center. From my vantage point, I could see nearly every inch of the row dining room, a space I knew better than my own kitchen. The sideboard still held the same chipped frames from my childhood, a faded Polaroid of Adam at Little League, a smiling family portrait from a long ago Christmas. The scent of aftershave, my dad's, I realized, mixed with the smells of cinnamon, barbecue sauce, and freshly sliced lemons. Jazz standards played on the stereo, the kind of music my mother put on for company, cheerful and a little too loud, as if hoping to drown out any awkward silences. Linda, my mother, moved among the guests with practiced ease, always a glass of white wine in hand. She stopped to compliment a neighbor on her new shoes, then moved to a cousin, before inevitably making her way to the group gathered around Adam. I could hear her voice, proud and bright. Yes, Adam just started as regional manager. Can you believe it? We're all so proud. There it was again, that shining thread running through every conversation. The family's pride and joy, always Adam. Gladys, who'd found her seat next to me, leaned over and offered a small smile. I saved you one of my lemon bars, dear. Thought you could use a little sweetness tonight. She handed me a napkin-wrapped square, her eyes kind. I murmured my thanks, grateful for the gesture, even if it made me feel a bit like a child being comforted after a rough day at school. Across the table, an aunt I hadn't seen in years adjusted her glasses and looked me up and down. So, Evelyn, still living alone out there in your apartment? Her voice was loud enough to cut through the music, drawing a few curious glances. I nodded, managing a polite smile. Yes, I'm still at the place on 11th. She pursed her lips. That must get lonely. She said it as if she were commenting on the weather, not my life. Before I could respond, Becky chimed in from a nearby table, a teasing lilt in her voice. Evelyn's always working. She's practically married to her job, aren't you, sis? She winked at the table, her laughter light but sharp around the edges. The words landed heavier than I expected. It was meant as a joke, I told myself, but there was truth under the surface, the kind that makes your skin prickle. I thought back to last Christmas, standing at the sink, scraping plates while Adam held court, carving the ham and soaking up every compliment. That night, my mom had leaned in and whispered, "Don't worry, honey, we see how hard you work." But the only evidence of that was the stack of dishes left for me at the end of the meal. A server appeared and began laying out plates. There was brisket, steaming and fragrant, a spoonful of potato salad, a deviled egg perfectly dusted with paprika. My mouth watered at the sight, but as the plates made their way around the table, I realized something was missing from mine, a slice of the famous pecan pie. It was a small oversight, easy to fix, but no one seemed to notice. The conversation rolled on, skipping over me, as if I were simply another piece of furniture wedged between the refrigerator and the swinging door. I tried to join in, asking Gladys about her garden and listening as she described her tomato plants and the late frost that threatened her rose bushes. She squeezed my hand once, wordlessly, as if she knew I needed grounding. For a moment, I felt steadier, reminded that kindness can slip in quietly, almost unnoticed, even in the most uncomfortable settings. Then, as the hum of conversation ebbed, a family friend, a man I barely recognized but who'd known us for decades, raised his voice over the music. "Evelyn, why aren't you up at the main table with the family? You're not hiding from us, are you?" The words hung in the air, heavier than the scent of roast beef. All conversation stopped. I looked up, feeling the heat rise in my cheeks. All eyes seemed to land on me, searching for an answer I didn't have. For a long moment, no one said a thing. Linda, never one to leave a silence unfilled, swept in quickly, laughter just a touch too bright. "Oh, you know how Evelyn is? Always happiest wherever there's good food." She waved her hand as if dismissing the question, and just like that, the room's attention shifted back to Adam, to stories of his latest business trip, to the plans for his next promotion. I stared down at my plate, tracing the edge with my fork, appetite gone. It struck me, Not for the first time, that I might always be a guest in my own story, present, but never truly part of the picture. The refrigerator hummed, the door swung open and closed, the music played on, and I wondered what it would take to feel at home at this table. I glanced at the photos on the sideboard. Images of childhood birthdays, summer picnics, Christmas mornings, all frozen moments from a life that now felt a world away. My own face stared back from those frames, younger, hopeful, caught between the siblings who would always shine brighter. It seemed strange that, for all the evidence of my presence, I still felt like an afterthought. I took a slow breath, the taste of lemon bar lingering on my tongue, and braced myself for whatever conversation or omission would come next. The lights dimmed, and suddenly the living room felt more like a ballroom than a family home. Fairy lights draped along the ceiling gave everything a soft, golden hue, while the laughter and clinking glasses seemed to echo from every corner. Servers weaved between tables with silver trays of mini quiches and stuffed mushrooms, and the air was sweet with the scent of champagne and fresh-cut flowers. The music faded, replaced by the low crackle of the rented PA system. Adam's name was called, and the guests, all of them, it seemed, rose to their feet, glasses held high, ready for the toast. I found myself standing too, though there was no seat for me up front. The head table, which should have been a place for family, was crowded with Adam, Becky, Frank, Linda, and a few of Adam's oldest friends. I lingered at the edge, pressed into the shadows near a side table laden with appetizers. Champagne glasses caught the light, reflecting little sparks onto the walls. I tried to blend into the wallpaper, invisible yet again. Adam took the microphone with the same natural confidence that had made him the golden child since childhood. "Thank you all for being here tonight," he began, his voice ringing out with practiced warmth. "I wouldn't be the man I am today without my wonderful family." He paused, scanning the crowd, his gaze skimming over me as if by accident. "My parents taught me loyalty, hard work, and," he stopped for effect, and everyone waited. "The meaning of true love." The room erupted in polite applause. Linda, never able to resist a spotlight, jumped in before Adam could finish. She gently took the microphone, her voice effusive. "Adam has always been our pride and joy," she gushed, her hand resting on his shoulder. "From his first science fair win to this new job, regional manager, he's made us so proud." I caught Frank nodding in the background, his glass already half empty. Frank rose to offer a toast. "To Adam, may he always find success, and may we, his family, continue to stand behind him." He held up his glass, but didn't so much as glance in my direction. I felt my chest tighten, the familiar ache of being left out, again, pressing in, sharper than the bubbles in my untouched champagne. There was a flurry of clapping. Someone in the back called out, "Here's to the rose." The chorus of voices rose, filling the space with sound, but somehow making me feel smaller with every note. And then, unexpectedly, Linda turned toward me, still holding the microphone. "Of course, family is more than just parents and sons. Evelyn, darling, won't you come say a few words?" My breath caught. 100 eyes swung to find me, their faces open, expectant, some smiling, some simply curious. For a moment, I remembered Adam's high school graduation. I'd been asked to speak, just a quick word about how proud we all were. But halfway through, the microphone was cut off, and my voice disappeared beneath the sound of applause for Adam's scholarship announcement. I never finished that speech. Now, as I made my way slowly to the front, my heart hammered so loudly in my ears that I could barely hear the music starting up again in the background. My hand shook as I accepted the microphone. It felt heavy, cold, awkward in my grip. Adam gave me an encouraging nod, but his eyes were already drifting away, searching for the next spotlight. I cleared my throat, feeling a tremor in my voice. I'm grateful to be here to celebrate Adam and all he's accomplished. I tried to keep it light, to focus on memories, late-night homework, childhood pranks, afternoons spent playing baseball in the backyard. But each word felt like it belonged to someone else. Linda suddenly leaned forward, her smile wide, and took back the microphone. Wouldn't it be the perfect gift, she announced brightly, if Evelyn handed over the condo keys to Adam tonight? The words hit me like a slap. For a moment, the entire room stilled. I stared at her, searching her face for some sign that this was a joke, some glimmer of humor or warmth. But all I saw was calculation, expectation. The silence was deep, almost suffocating. I looked out at the crowd. Everyone's eyes were on me, some amused, some sympathetic, most simply waiting to see what I would do. My pulse pounded in my temples. I felt exposed, as if every vulnerability, every slight over the years, was suddenly visible to everyone in that brightly lit room. From the corner of my vision, I saw Gladys. She caught my eye and, without a word, silently mouthed, "You don't have to." It was the only comfort in a sea of pressure. But I couldn't speak. Not one word. My throat closed, and my mind raced. Should I laugh it off? Argue? Agree? Disappear? I froze, my hands trembling so hard I nearly dropped the microphone. The crowd waited, the moment stretching long and thin. My mother's smile was painted on, brittle at the edges. Adam stared at the floor, and Frank tapped his glass as if urging me to hurry up. Even Becky looked slightly uncomfortable, though I suspected she was more worried about the spectacle than about me. For a moment, I thought of bolting, just turning and slipping out the side door. But I stood there, rooted to the spot, speechless. Everyone was watching, waiting for me to play my part. The light was almost blinding, bright and artificial in the low-slung ceiling of my parents' living room. Or maybe it only felt that way because every eye was on me, waiting, expectant, a hush settling over the crowd that left even the soft hum of the refrigerator and the background jazz suspended in air. I could feel Mom's hand on my shoulder, firm and warm, her fingers just a little too tight. She leaned in, her voice sugary sweet for the microphone, but sharp enough to cut in my ear. Just a little family favor, sweetheart, for your brother's future. You know how much it would mean to Adam. To all of us. In that strange, floating moment, my memory flickered, moments from my childhood tumbling forward unbidden. Every spelling bee ribbon that turned into a story about how Adam had coached me, every school project where my contribution faded into his name on the certificate, every dollar I chipped in for a family bill when Adam couldn't quite manage, only to watch him praised for being the responsible one. I'd always told myself it was just family, that one day it would all even out. Now, standing here, I saw those moments for what they were, a pattern, always nudging me to the side so he could shine brighter. The guests were a blur beyond the lights. I caught glimpses of faces, some curious, some embarrassed, a few grinning as if they were in on some private joke. A man near the back held up his phone, recording. Becky, perched at the edge of the front row, tried to lighten the mood. Come on, Ev, don't make it weird. It's just a key. Her voice was too loud, too forced, laughter brittle as spun glass. I tried to step back, to find some edge of the stage where the pressure would lift, but Mom kept her hand anchored on my arm. Frank, standing nearby with his jaw set, nodded at her, then turned to me. You know what's right, Evelyn. Family comes first. Haven't we given you enough over the years? His voice rose, each word heavy with accusation and disappointment. I felt him move closer, his presence crowding me forward, physically guiding me toward the microphone until I was standing squarely in the light, boxed in by the silence and the faces and the weight of expectation. Adam stared at the floor, hands clasped so tightly I thought his knuckles would crack. He didn't look at me, wouldn't meet my eyes. For a flicker of a second, I almost wished he'd stand up for me, say, enough, tell our parents to leave me be. But that hope was thin as paper. Becky's laughter had faded, her gaze sliding away. Only Gladys, from her seat near the back, looked at me, her lips moving silently. You don't have to. But even that comfort felt far away. I tried to deflect, to smile and wave off the demand. It's not really the time, is it? Maybe we can talk later, just the family. But Mom shook her head, her grip tightening, her face carefully blank for the crowd. Why not now? What better time than surrounded by everyone who loves us? Don't you want to do something special for your brother's big night? My mouth felt dry. My heart hammered in my chest, each beat rattling the words loose from my tongue before I could form them. I searched the room for an ally, a lifeline. But all I saw were guests waiting for the punchline, phones raised, glasses clinking, whispers flitting like moths in the shadows. Every path away from the spotlight was blocked. Frank's patience snapped. He stepped into the light, his voice echoing off the hardwood and the walls. Family comes first, Evelyn. Haven't we given you enough? Is it so much to ask that you give back? His face was flushed, not with drink, but with frustration, with the need to prove something in front of all these people. I felt the eyes of the room burn into me, hot and unforgiving. If I said no, if I stood my ground, I'd be the villain, the ungrateful daughter, the sister who ruined her brother's night. If I said yes, if I caved right here in front of everyone, I'd lose the one thing I'd built for myself, the only place that felt like home. My vision blurred. I blinked, willing the tears not to fall, refusing to give them the satisfaction. But I could feel it, a single tear, hot and traitorous, sliding down my cheek. I wiped it away before anyone could see, turning it into a quick brush of my hand as if adjusting my hair. The silence stretched, the air thick with expectation. Somewhere, the music tried to start again but faltered. Someone had paused the stereo, as if even the house was holding its breath. Adam shifted, his voice barely audible. Mom, maybe we should, but Linda cut him off with a glare. I took a breath, my mind racing. Was this who I wanted to be? Was this the moment that would define me forever, folding under the weight of other people's dreams, sacrificing my own peace for the sake of a performance? All eyes were on me, 100 silent judgments hovering in the golden light. I realized, suddenly, that it didn't matter which way I answered, someone would always see me as the villain or as the fool. Maybe the only thing left was to finally choose myself. Dad's hand hit the table so hard it sounded like thunder. The glasses rattled and one toppled, rolling toward the edge before Linda caught it with a quick, practiced hand. The jazz faded mid-note, someone's finger freezing on the remote, and the chatter of the party shrank to nothing, a hush so deep I could hear my own heart thumping. For a moment, no one moved. I stood there, raw and exposed in the harsh light, with the ghost of a tear still drying on my cheek. I saw the familiar pattern in the faces around me, shock, embarrassment, the guilty pleasure of watching a family drama unfold. This wasn't the first time something like this had happened. I remembered every holiday argument, every time I didn't fall in line, how the scene always ended the same way, with me outnumbered, the air thick with disapproval. But never like this. Never with an audience this large. Never with my own father slamming the table to make his point. Frank's voice shook, not with sorrow, but with anger. You think you're so special, Evelyn? You think you can stand up here and judge the rest of us? After all we've given you? He raised his voice, projecting so everyone could hear, his words bouncing off the vaulted ceiling and echoing through the silence. Selfish. That's what this is. Pure, ungrateful selfishness. I tried to speak, but my lips wouldn't work. Linda's face, pinched and pale, was set in disappointment. She wouldn't even look at me. Adam and Becky both studied their plates, the way you do when you want to be anywhere else. A wave of heat crawled up my neck, anger, shame, and the old, bitter ache of not belonging. Every eye in the room seemed to be fixed on me, waiting for my answer, or maybe just waiting for the show to go on. No one came to my defense. A couple of family friends shifted in their seats, pretending to check their phones. Others averted their eyes, embarrassed for me or for themselves. I could never tell which. In the corner, Gladys started to stand, her hands trembling, but another guest, someone younger, stronger, gently pulled her back into her chair. It was clear, this wasn't her fight. Maybe it never had been. Frank pressed on, his voice growing louder. How dare you put yourself above your own family? Your brother's future is at stake. We all make sacrifices. Evelyn, don't think you're the only one who's ever had to give something up. He snatched the microphone from its stand, turning to address the whole room as if he were delivering a sermon. Is this what we raised her for? Is this the gratitude we deserve? The silence grew heavier, suffocating. Even the house seemed to hold its breath. Someone dropped a fork, it clattered to the floor and rang out, sharp as a bell, slicing through the tension. It sounded, absurdly, like a starter's pistol for my sense of defeat. I watched it spin, silver flashing in the dim light, and realized it was the only thing moving in a room gone suddenly still. I took a shaky breath, steadying myself on the table. My knuckles turned white around the edge of the linen, fingers digging in just to keep from collapsing. My chest felt tight, each inhale a struggle. In that moment, I saw, maybe more clearly than ever before, that I was alone. I saw the truth in my mother's tight mouth, in Becky's downcast eyes, in the rigid line of Adam's shoulders. I would never win here, never be seen as anything but difficult, no matter how many times I tried. Linda finally looked at me, her eyes glazed and cold. We only wanted what was best for you, Evelyn. We always have. I almost laughed. The absurdity of it, a family asking for my home as a party favor, turning my refusal into a public spectacle, struck me as so surreal I wondered if I was dreaming. But there was nothing soft or blurred about the faces watching me, about the lights bearing down or the anger burning in my father's voice. A murmur swept through the crowd as Frank, microphone still in hand, looked to the guests for approval. Some nodded, others looked away. A few whispered to each other, barely concealing their fascination. No one stepped in. Not a soul tried to stop this train wreck. That was the final crack. Whatever thin thread of hope I'd been holding onto, that someone would intervene, that anyone would say enough, snapped in two. I stumbled back, the world blurring around the edges. My heart pounded so loud I could barely hear my own thoughts. For the first time, I was no longer embarrassed. I was done. I steadied myself on the table, breathing in slow, jagged gulps. If I didn't leave now, I might never get out. That thought was clear, simple, and terrifying. The hush in the room deepened as I pushed back my chair. The lone fork on the floor glinted up at me, a small, stupid reminder of everything I'd dropped, everything I'd lost by trying to belong here. I knew, as I looked around the room one last time, that this was the moment trust was finally, irreversibly shattered. Maybe it had been breaking for years, but tonight, under the golden lights, surrounded by strangers and family alike, it split down the middle. I realized I had to go. Not just for tonight, but maybe for good. The drive home felt endless. I gripped the steering wheel, headlights slicing through the hush of Austin's late-night streets. Stoplights blinked red and green, empty sidewalks unfurled beneath the ghostly glow of street lamps. I kept the radio off, let the silence settle over me, only the steady rhythm of the car's engine and the soft tap of rain on the windshield breaking through. My chest ached, hollowed out from everything left unsaid at the party. It almost felt like floating, numb, detached, as if I were watching someone else's life unfold through the windshield. I caught a flash of memory, a much younger me, soaked and shivering, walking home from school in a storm because no one remembered to pick me up. I remembered the cold, the ache in my calves, the sting of being forgotten. Now, years later, the feeling was the same, alone, invisible, moving through the world as if I weren't really there. When I pulled into my building's parking garage, the city buzzed quietly in the distance. I sat in the car for a minute, breathing slowly, willing myself to move. The condo was small but spotless, every photo, every lamp, placed with care. It was the only space I'd ever truly called mine. As I closed the door behind me, I slid the deadbolt, then turned the knob back and forth, checking it twice. Old habit. I walked through the apartment, flicking on lights, listening for any sound that felt out of place. My hands trembled as I checked the windows locked, just as I'd left them. I set my bag on the kitchen counter, reaching for the spare key I always kept clipped to the side pocket, but it was missing. I frowned, turning the bag upside down. Loose change, chapstick, old receipts tumbled out, but no key. My mind raced, tracing back to the last time I'd used it. I couldn't remember. Moving through the apartment, I noticed little things that felt off, a drawer in the bedroom left open, the faintest trace of unfamiliar cologne lingering in the hallway. My skin prickled. Had someone been here? The question rolled around my head, feeding a rising sense of violation. The room looked the same, but the air felt wrong, invaded. I checked my jewelry box, the kitchen drawers, even my closet. Nothing seemed to be missing, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something precious had been touched, that a boundary had been quietly crossed. My phone vibrated, cutting through the fog. A text from Gladys. Thinking of you, dear. You did nothing wrong. Call if you need anything. I read it twice, blinking back tears. I wanted to reply, thank you, I'm fine, but my fingers hovered over the screen. I wasn't fine. I was rattled, raw, and more alone than I'd been in years. An incoming call flashed. Linda. I stared at the screen, letting it ring. I couldn't bear to hear her voice, not now, not with the echo of the party still pounding in my head. I watched the call time out and disappear, replaced almost instantly by a new message alert. Sam. My heartbeat picked up. He'd been my friend since college, the kind of person who always seemed to know when to check in. You home safe? His text read. I typed back, yes. Just got in. Not great. My phone buzzed again, this time with a call. I picked up, my voice barely a whisper. Hey, Evelyn? You okay? Sam's voice was soft, steady. I clung to it like a lifeline. Not really. I think someone's been in my apartment. My spare key is gone. And I hesitated, the words sticky and surreal. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Sam was quiet for a moment. Check your email, okay? There's something you need to see. My hands shook as I unlocked my laptop and opened my inbox. Buried in the clutter was a message from an unfamiliar realtor. "Hello, Evelyn. Confirming your showing scheduled for Friday at noon. Please let us know if you'll be using the lockbox or will meet us at the property." My heart pounded. I hadn't scheduled any showing. I hadn't spoken to a realtor. The message was CC'd to someone named Linda Rowe. The room spun. I pressed my palm to the table to steady myself. My parents. Of course. They'd taken my key. They'd come into my home, gone through my things, tried to sell the condo behind my back, all while smiling and asking for a favor at Adam's party. I called Sam back, voice shaking. "They're trying to sell my place." I didn't give permission I didn't even know. He was instantly all business. "Listen to me. Meet me at my office first thing in the morning. Bring every document you have, deeds, emails, anything. Don't talk to them, not tonight. Lock everything. Screenshot that email. You'll stay ahead of them, but you have to act now." I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. "Okay, I will." When we hung up, I sank onto the couch, curling my knees to my chest. My condo, my safe place, suddenly felt like a stranger's house. Every creak and distant car horn put me on edge. The city buzzed outside, distant and indifferent, a lullaby for someone else's peace. I turned off the lights, stretched out on top of the covers, and listened to the sound of my own breathing, counting each inhale, each exhale, the only rhythm I could control. I checked my phone one last time. No new messages. No apologies. No explanations. Only Gladys's gentle encouragement and Sam's steady, practical support. Sleep wouldn't come. I stared at the ceiling, tracing the shadows from streetlights on the wall, feeling both more alone and more awake than I'd ever been. Something had shifted, broken open. Fear still lingered, but underneath, a new resolve began to stir. I had been pushed to the edge, but for the first time in a long while, I was ready to push back. The coffee in Sam's office was nothing like the kind I brewed at home. It was strong, sharp, a little burnt, nothing sweet about it. Still, I drank every bitter sip. There was something comforting in the way it jolted me awake, a small shock to the system that matched the new, hard edge I felt inside. The world outside was just waking up, Austin's morning haze making the city glow soft and blue, but I felt sharper, more alert, as if I'd stepped out of the fog I'd lived in for years. Sam's office was nothing like the slick, intimidating law firms you see on TV. It was cluttered but homey, with books stacked on every surface, diplomas and framed photos of grateful clients covering the walls. I felt oddly safe here, as if the messiness was a kind of armor, proof that real work got done here and that sometimes life didn't fit into perfect boxes. He was already flipping through the folder of property documents I'd brought, glasses perched low on his nose, his hair sticking up a little from where he'd run his hands through it. He barely looked up when he spoke. "You sleep at all last night?" "Not much," I said. "Too busy checking every lock, listening for footsteps." He nodded, sympathetic. "That's how it starts, you know. They take your peace of mind first. But we're going to get it back." We worked in silence for a while, the only sounds the scrape of paper and the distant rumble of traffic. Sam asked questions, sharp and to the point. When did I last see the spare key? Had I changed the locks since moving in? Did I have any witnesses to the break-in? He flagged the realtor's email, highlighting the unauthorized access and the sale I'd never consented to. As he built the timeline, I watched him, realizing how rare it was to have someone in my corner who didn't second-guess my reality. A callback from years earlier surfaced in my mind. Sam once told me, after a long day fighting someone else's family case, sometimes the real battle isn't in the courtroom. It's at the kitchen table. I'd laugh then, thinking it was just a quip, but now it rang true in my bones. Sam outlined our next steps: file an official police report about the missing key, notify the condo association, email the realtor formally denying consent to any showings, and change your locks today, he said. Not just the main one. All of them. I'll get you a guy I trust. He made a note, then looked at me, serious. Your parents aren't just pushing boundaries. This is fraud. And it's criminal, not just civil. You're not alone here, Evelyn. We'll fight this. My phone buzzed, a new voicemail from Linda. I let it play on speaker, her voice smooth and measured, but laced with accusation. Evelyn, this isn't what family does. I don't understand why you're acting this way. Think about what you're doing to Adam. You're breaking your father's heart. Call me back. Let's fix this like a real family. I closed my eyes, breathing through the familiar blend of guilt and anger. She never even says sorry, I muttered. Just turns it around on me. Sam's face softened, just for a moment. People like that, they only apologize when it benefits them. Don't let it get in your head. He reached for another stack of papers, sorting through old deeds and tax statements. Then he paused, frowning. Wait a second. This can't be right. He turned a yellow document toward me. Look here, your name's on the deed for your parents' house. Not just as an emergency contact, as owner. Was there a refinance? An old loan. I stared, confused. That was years ago. After Dad lost his job, I helped with the paperwork. I think I co-signed so they could keep the house. I barely remember. Sam grinned, almost triumphant. The title never got transferred back. As far as the bank's concerned, you're still the owner. They're living there because you let them. That gives you more leverage than you think. For a moment, the floor dropped away beneath me. The power dynamic had shifted. I wasn't the desperate one anymore. What does that mean? It means, Sam said, if your parents want to play hardball, you can file for eviction. It's not revenge. It's about your rights. And maybe it's time they learned that actions have consequences. My phone buzzed again, a text from Adam. Ev, can we talk? I don't want to take sides, but this is getting out of hand. I stared at the words, my thumb hovering over the reply, but I couldn't bring myself to answer. Not yet. A gentle ping, Gladys, checking in. Rooting for you, kid. Let me know if you need anything. I smiled, feeling, for the first time in days, a thin thread of hope winding through my chest. Sam leaned across the desk, steady and sure. You ready to use your leverage, Evelyn? I nodded, feeling something inside me settle. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't just defending myself, I was fighting back. And Sam, with his coffee-stained papers and cluttered office, was right there beside me. The first person in years who truly stood by me. The envelope was thick, official, impossible to ignore. It was waiting for me in the metal mailbox downstairs. Just another piece of mail until I turned it over and saw the words stamped in bold. Notice to vacate, owner's demand for possession. My hands trembled as I pulled it free, the paper heavier than it had any right to be. I thought, absurdly, of every time I'd mailed a birthday card home or dropped a check in the mail to cover a family emergency, those envelopes always light, easy, vanishing into the mailbox like nothing at all. But this was a reckoning. I walked upstairs, the letter pressed flat against my chest. The condo was silent, a cool calm filling the space I'd come to cherish. I laid the envelope on the kitchen counter and just looked at it for a while, trying to steady my breath. I could almost hear Sam's voice from that morning, firm, matter of fact. You're not doing this to punish them, Evelyn. You're doing this to protect yourself. That matters. The paperwork was all ready. My name on the line, Sam's on the representative line, each signature like a stone in a foundation I was finally building for myself. It was strange. Signing those documents, I didn't feel angry. I didn't even feel triumphant. Mostly, I felt hollowed out and determined, a kind of tired resolve settling in my bones. I was done being the easy mark. I was done being the safety net everyone expected, but no one truly valued. All those years, whenever the family needed money, it was my name on the wire transfer. My credit, my quiet sacrifice, my steady hand. But never, not once, did anyone call me the homeowner. Not when the bills were due, not when the mortgage needed renegotiating, not when the plumbing failed and I paid the repairman out of pocket. Now, finally, that word owner was real, with all its weight and all its consequences. After Sam filed the notice, I found myself restless, unable to stay in my own apartment. I texted Gladys, no preamble, just, "You home?" Her reply came quick and warm, always. "Come for tea." I baked. Her kitchen was small, cluttered, and filled with the scent of lemons and sugar. She ushered me in like I was family, not just the neighbor girl she'd watched grow up. The table was set with her best blue and white china, a lemon pound cake already sliced and waiting. She poured tea, real tea, steeped in a battered old pot, and sat across from me, her hands folded gently around her cup. We talked, or rather, she listened while I tried to put words to the storm in my chest. "It feels wrong," I confessed. Even now, even after everything, I keep thinking I should call them, apologize, take it all back. Gladys's eyes were soft, kind. It doesn't feel good to put up a boundary when you've been taught your whole life to tear yours down for others. But sometimes, loving yourself means closing a door someone else keeps trying to walk through. She shared her own story, how her sister had once nearly bankrupted her, how she'd lost friends by standing up for herself. "It's lonely for a while," she admitted. "But then, you learn to fill the quiet with things that belong to you. Hobbies, new friendships, even just a peaceful morning without dread. The pain fades. The peace grows." We sat in companionable silence, the world outside fading into dusk. I realized, slowly, how much comfort can live in a single cup of tea, in the steady company of someone who expects nothing from you but honesty. Gladys sliced another piece of cake, setting it beside my cup with a smile. "You don't have to finish it all now," she said. "But you're welcome to." Later that night, my phone wouldn't stop vibrating. The family group chat, normally silent, filled with the occasional forwarded meme or recipe, was suddenly a storm. Linda and Frank raged in rapid-fire texts, indignation simmering between the lines. "How could you? After all we've done for you. You're tearing this family apart." Becky weighed in with her own brand of venom, all sweetness and knives. "Maybe next time you'll let us know before you evict your own parents." Adams stayed silent. Not a word, not a reply. Just his name hovering, a presence I could almost feel watching but never stepping in. I didn't respond. For the first time, I let the arguments roll over me like rain on a tin roof, loud, persistent, but unable to touch me where I sat. There was grief, yes, but it was cleaner now, less tangled up in guilt or shame. When I returned to my condo, I found myself holding the envelope again. The official language was cold, impersonal, almost cruel in its precision. But beneath it all, I felt a spark, small, flickering, but alive. Justice, I realized, doesn't always look like what we expect. Sometimes it's not a victory march, but a quiet moment of choosing yourself, even when it hurts. I thought of the row house, soon to be empty, The echoes of family dinners and holiday arguments replaced by silence. I wondered, for the first time, if freedom would feel lonely or liberating. Maybe both. Maybe, like Gladys said, peace grows slowly, one cup of tea, one small victory at a time. As I readied myself for bed, the taste of lemon still on my tongue, I understood. I wasn't just taking my home back. I was taking my life back, too. The storm hit the row house long before any boxes were packed. From the outside, it probably looked like any other spring cleaning, curtains drawn, the sound of tape snapping over cardboard, furniture shifted just out of place. But inside, the air was thick with something else entirely, panic, shame, and a kind of breathless disbelief, as if no one could quite accept what was happening. The house that had always seemed so solid, so untouchable, was now an island slowly breaking apart. I watched the fallout from a distance, my phone lighting up with updates and rumors, my own heart caught somewhere between relief and regret. I remembered Dad once standing in the front yard, sunburned and proud, telling a neighbor, "This house will always be ours." His voice then was strong, certain, the weight of belonging wrapped around every word. Now I imagined that certainty unraveling, thread by stubborn thread. Linda moved first, as she always did, her energy frantic and purposeful. She called every relative she could think of, Aunt Helen in Houston, Uncle Dan in Tulsa, even cousins I hadn't spoken to since high school. "It's a misunderstanding," she said, her voice tight. "Evelyn's just confused. She's not herself." When the phone calls didn't yield sympathy, she turned to the neighbors, her voice dropping to a confidential whisper. I knew the script: loyalty, betrayal, family values. The curtains across the street barely fluttered, but I could feel the eyes, the quiet judgment. Frank, for his part, grew quieter by the day. He wandered from room to room, fingers trailing along the banisters, pausing by old family photos, his shoulders hunched under an invisible weight. He didn't yell, didn't plead, he simply withdrew, as if he could erase himself from the narrative entirely. The man who once lectured us about taking responsibility now seemed lost, a ghost in his own home. Adam was the loudest. He sent text after text, some blistering with anger, others so sad I almost called him. "Why are you doing this, Ev?" he wrote. "All I ever wanted was for us to be a family." There was blame in his words, but underneath it, something softer, a plea for things to go back to the way they were. I couldn't answer, not yet. There were no words for the way the ground had shifted beneath us all. Becky, true to form, rode the wave of drama with whiplash moods. One day, she sent passive-aggressive gifs and long screeds about loyalty. The next, she left voicemails, voice trembling, asking if we could just have a sister's night and forget all this. I wished, for a moment, that I could. But some lines, once crossed, don't fade. Group texts flared up and died down. Old friends weighed in with vague messages, "Thinking of you. Hope you're okay." Some quietly sided with my parents, others with me, but most just watched from a distance, like drivers slowing down at the scene of an accident. Word got around faster than I could keep up. I heard about it from a friend of a friend. "So the Rose are in trouble, huh?" Rumors had a way of growing legs, and soon the whole neighborhood was buzzing. Gladys was a steady presence, checking in every evening. "Remember, you didn't start this," she told me over the phone as I watched dusk settle over my condo. "You just stopped letting it continue." That's a kind of courage most people never find. One night, the radio played softly in the background, a call-in show about family feuds across America. Listeners shared stories of broken wills, siblings at odds, parents ousted from homes they once ruled. I listened, thinking how strange it was to hear echoes of my own life, how universal our private pain could be. Boxes piled up by the door at the row house, Christmas decorations, stacks of old board games, the mismatched china Mom insisted we use on special occasions. I pictured Linda, directing the chaos with her usual sense of order, and Frank, lingering over every item, uncertain what to take and what to leave behind. As for me, I found myself waking up earlier, sleeping less. Each day brought a new message, a new confrontation, a new memory surfacing when I least expected it. I'd walk through the city, letting the noise and bustle wash over me, grateful for the anonymity. No one here knew my story. No one watched me with disappointment or suspicion. Late one evening, as I poured myself a cup of tea, my phone vibrated. A new message from Linda, different from the others. There was no anger, no accusation. Just raw, exhausted honesty. Evelyn, please. Just one last talk. No lawyers, no fighting. Just us. I need my daughter. For a long time, I stared at the words, not trusting them, not trusting myself. But something in her message cracked the shell I'd built around my heart. My thumb hovered over the screen. Was this an olive branch, or just another move in a game I no longer wanted to play? I didn't know. But for the first time, I wanted to find out. Outside, the city kept moving. The world didn't pause for family drama, not even mine. But for the first time in months, I felt the weight begin to shift, subtle, uncertain, but real. Maybe, just maybe, the story wasn't over yet. The house looked smaller than I remembered. Maybe it was the way the afternoon light crept in, dusty and pale, or maybe it was the piles of boxes and unsorted life crowding the hallways. Mom met me at the door with a careful smile, her hands trembling ever so slightly as she led me inside. I noticed she'd set out the lemon cookies I loved as a child, stacked neatly on a china plate. She made tea, the ritual familiar, her movements practiced, but not quite steady. The clink of the spoon in the cup was the only sound for a moment, a small, nervous rhythm. In the living room, photo albums were spread out on the coffee table like peace offerings. The pages were open to the happiest years, birthdays, Christmases, vacations at the lake. I saw myself in those pictures, a child with a gap-toothed grin, hugging Adam, balancing on Frank's knee, always at the edges, but smiling anyway. The air was thick, not with anger, but with everything left unsaid. Becky was already there, perched on the edge of the couch, her expression hopeful and wary. Frank sat beside her, silent, his gaze fixed on some distant point beyond the carpet. Adam wasn't there yet, but his absence hung in the room, sharp as the scent of fresh lemons. Mom poured the tea, her hands shaking so much I worried she'd spill it. "Let's just talk, sweetheart," she said, her voice brittle but trying for warmth. "No lawyers, no shouting. Just us." I nodded, waiting. I remembered every family meeting we'd had in this room, how they always started as discussions and ended with me feeling cornered. My words turned against me, trust chipped away with every gentle-sounding plea. At first, Linda kept her tone light, as if we could will ourselves back to normal. She talked about family, about hard times and new beginnings. She reminded me of Dad's health, Becky's job troubles, Adam's recent heartbreak. She painted the family as fragile, at risk, and me, the only one who could fix it. I listened, fingers tight around the mug. "Evelyn, you know we're all struggling. Your father and we're not young anymore. This house means everything to us. It's not just four walls. It's our history, Your childhood. Adam's homecoming. Frank shifted in his seat, but still said nothing. Becky reached out, placing a tentative hand on my knee. We could work something out, Ev. Maybe just transfer the deed for a while, give Mom and Dad time to get on their feet. You don't have to do it forever. Just until things settle. I met her eyes, saw the fear and hope tangled together. I'm not your lifeboat, I said gently. Not anymore. There was a pause, then the familiar pivot. Linda's tone hardened, her smile fading at the edges. How can you be so cold, Evelyn? After everything we've done for you, every sacrifice, every sleepless night. You'd let your own family lose their home. She slid a thick folder across the table. Just sign. It's just paperwork, honey. A formality. For the family's future. You wouldn't want to break us up, would you? My heart pounded, but my hands were steady. I thought of every lesson I'd learned in this room, not the ones they meant to teach me, but the ones I learned by surviving it. You taught me what trust is, I said, voice clear. By showing me what it's not. Frank finally spoke, his voice so soft I almost missed it. Maybe we deserve this, he murmured, staring down at his hands. Just then, Adam entered, hair tousled, face drawn. He barely looked at me, heading straight for Mom. I'm leaving, he said quietly. I can't stay here, not with all this going on. He glanced at me once, eyes full of hurt and accusation. You broke us, Evelyn. You really did. The silence that followed was heavy, pressing in from all sides. I looked at Mom, tears running down her face, real, raw, but I couldn't tell if they were for me, or for the home, or for all the years we'd never get back. I wished I could reach for her, comfort her, but I didn't move. Outside, I glimpsed the mailman sliding envelopes into the box, bills, probably, maybe final notices, real-world consequences intruding on our little drama. I heard his footsteps on the gravel, the brief chatter of a neighbor's TV drifting through an open window. Life, relentless and practical, marching on whether we reconciled or not. I set my cup down, pushing the folder back. I'm not signing, I said, my voice gentle but final. I hope someday we can build something honest. But it can't start with a lie. Becky started to cry, but I couldn't do anything for her, not now. I stood, heart aching but lighter somehow. The meeting wasn't the ambush I'd feared, nor the healing I'd hoped for. It was something in between, a final, quiet break from the past. As I walked out, I didn't look back. Not at the photo albums, not at the cookies, not at my mother's tears. Sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is leave a room and trust that what's broken can't be mended by the same hands that broke it. Adam's car was already gone by the time I stepped outside. The early spring breeze tugged at the hem of my coat and carried away the last faint echoes of our family meeting, dissolving them into the ordinary sounds of a neighborhood going about its business. It could have been any morning, delivery vans idling, children riding bikes, the faint thud of a basketball down the street. But for me, it was the day I left my childhood home behind for good. The front porch felt smaller, the boards creaking as I paused for a breath. The lemon scent of Mom's cookies still lingered in my hands, though the taste had long since faded. I remembered Dad's old saying, blood is thicker than water, but in that moment, it occurred to me that sometimes water is simply cleaner, able to wash away the stains that blood clings to out of habit. I heard hurried footsteps behind me. Becky caught up as I reached the driveway, her face blotchy from crying, mascara tracing uncertain lines down her cheeks. Please, Evelyn, she said, grabbing my wrist. Don't do this. We can fix it. We're still family. There was a time those words would have broken me, sent me running back into the house for one more round of apologies, one more shot at belonging. But not today. I gently pried her fingers from my arm. Becky, I love you. But loving someone doesn't mean letting them hurt you over and over. Her tears turned desperate. You don't mean that. You're just angry right now. I'm not angry, I said quietly. I'm done. There was a finality in my voice that surprised us both. She stared at me, then let her arms fall to her sides. I saw her searching my face for a crack, some sign that I'd cave, but I didn't. Frank stood in the doorway, his shoulders hunched and face drawn. He didn't say anything for a long time, just watched as I opened my car door and put my bag on the seat. Then, in a voice that barely carried past the porch, he said, I'm sorry, Evelyn. For a lot of things. We thought we were doing the right thing. Maybe we weren't. His words hung in the cool air, honest and heavy. I nodded, willing myself not to cry. I know, Dad. I meant it. Regret is its own quiet country, and in that moment, I felt us both standing on opposite banks, waving silently across the divide. Linda didn't come to the door. I glimpsed her through the window, sitting stiffly in her favorite chair, eyes locked on something far away. Maybe she was angry. Maybe she was grieving, or maybe, just maybe, she was finally letting me go. I wondered if she'd ever understand, or if she'd always remember me as the daughter who broke her heart. The drive back to my condo was a blur of green lights and unfamiliar radio songs. At every stoplight, I found myself looking in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see the house behind me, unchanged. But the further I drove, the lighter I felt, as if every mile was lifting a stone from my chest. When I got home, I found the silence comforting instead of oppressive. I locked the door, a habit now, but this time, not out of fear. I moved through the room slowly, touching the familiar objects that belonged to no one but me. The kitchen was spotless, the air scented faintly with vanilla from last night's candle. On the table, a single photograph caught the afternoon light, a picture I hadn't seen in years. It was me, about 7 or 8, perched on Dad's knee at a summer picnic, cheeks smudged with chocolate and grinning from ear to ear. Propped against the frame was a small, folded note in Frank's handwriting. We did love you, in our way. I stared at it for a long time, feeling something shift inside, a knot of grief, yes, but also an odd sort of relief. They had loved me. Maybe not well, maybe not enough, but in the only way they knew how. It wasn't what I'd wanted, but at least now it was clear. That evening, Gladys called. Her voice was a balm, warm and grounding. Endings are beginnings, honey, she said, echoing what she'd told me so many times before. It hurts, but it also frees you up to write your own story. And trust me, you get better at it every year. After we hung up, I took out an old candle from a dusty box, the one I used to light for good luck before exams or job interviews. I set it on the windowsill, struck a match, and watched the flame flicker into life. It glowed against the glass, small but steady, casting gentle shadows across the room. I sat with that light for a long time, letting the peace settle in around me. I was alone, but not lonely, not this time. The old rituals still had meaning, but now they belonged to me. This, I realized, was what freedom felt like, not a sudden absence of pain, but a gentle reclaiming of space. A home, at last, that didn't ask me to give up any part of myself to keep it. By Monday morning, my phone was already buzzing, notifications stacking up in bright, insistent red, the air thick with the static of digital outrage. I didn't need to click the links to know what I'd find. Linda's Facebook post, tagged with a photograph of our old house and the words, "Sometimes the deepest wounds are caused by your own child," was racking up likes, shares, and a surprising amount of neighborhood commentary. By noon, people I barely remembered from my high school years were weighing in with prayers, sad emojis, and, occasionally, a pointed question. Linda had always known how to craft a story that made her look blameless. She posted family photos cropped just so, tagged the church's prayer circle, and left just enough detail to invite sympathy. What she didn't include were the late-night phone calls, the years of silence, the bargains made behind closed doors. She let people fill in the gaps, and they did with gusto. I watched it unfold from the quiet of my condo, blinds drawn, sunlight striping the kitchen counter. At first, I tried to ignore it. But the comments came anyway, some from old friends, some from strangers. How could she do that to her own parents? There's always two sides. Hang in there, Linda. You raised them right. A few private messages trickled in, thinking of you. Don't let the haters get you down. I appreciated the kindness, even when it felt misplaced. Some messages hurt. A neighbor I'd thought of as an acquaintance wrote, "Just disappointed, Evelyn. I thought you were better than this." Another sent a long, rambling note about the importance of family and how regret lasts a lifetime. I read them all, the praise and the condemnation, the people picking sides without ever having stood in my shoes. The online neighborhood forum was worse, a slow-moving wildfire of rumor and speculation. There were threads about property values, wild guesses about legal troubles, and people dissecting my life like it was a public spectacle. I wanted to shout the truth, to correct every lie and omission. But when I opened the comment box, my hands froze over the keys. What good would it do to fight back, to trade one public narrative for another? Gladys showed up with coffee and a bag of scones. She found me sitting cross-legged on the living room rug, phone face down beside me, kettles steaming on the stove. She didn't need to ask what was wrong. Instead, she sat beside me, setting out the pastries with her usual calm, and let the silence stretch between us until my shoulders eased. "Don't take the bait, honey," she said softly. "The people who know you don't need an explanation. The ones who want to show, well, they'll move on to something else soon enough." I nodded, grateful for her steady presence. It's hard not to want to defend myself, to want people to understand. "People will believe what they want," she said. "What matters is that you know the truth, and that you're safe." Sam called around lunchtime, his voice brisk but reassuring. "Legally, you're fine," he said. "Let them say what they want online, it's noise. The court only cares about facts." He encouraged me to document any harassment, but not to respond. "This isn't about their approval, Evelyn. It's about your life. Don't give them the power to define you." I try to heed their advice, to let the digital noise fade into the background. I closed the laptop, made myself a cup of tea, and opened the window just wide enough to let in the city's distant hum. I thought about what it meant to have your story rewritten in public, how easily your identity could be stripped away and replaced with someone else's idea of who you are. I remembered all the years Linda had shaped the family narrative, glossed over rough edges, steered every holiday photo and dinner conversation away from the messy bits. Now the world was her audience. In a brief moment of weakness, I considered posting my own version, the legal documents, the emails, the receipts for every loan and favor never repaid. I wanted to expose the truth, to reclaim my dignity. But then I pictured the endless back and forth, the anonymous voices twisting my words, the certainty that no one really wins an online argument. Privacy, I realized, was the first thing I'd lost, and maybe the most important thing I could still protect. It was late afternoon when the mail arrived, a handful of flyers, a bill, and a single envelope with Adam's handwriting. My heart stuttered. I hadn't heard from him since the family meeting. His absence had grown into its own kind of wound. I stared at the envelope, my fingers numb, afraid to open it, afraid not to. Was this a peace offering or one final cut? I turned it over, debating, listening to the quiet in my condo, the ticking of the clock, the traffic in the distance, the city going on as if nothing had happened. For a moment, I just let the letter rest in my lap, breathing in the steam from my tea. I didn't need to read other people's judgments, didn't need to scroll through one more argument about who was right or wrong. The world online could keep spinning. Here in my small home, I found a kind of peace that couldn't be posted or commented away. I reached for my phone and texted Gladys, "Thank you for everything." She replied with a string of emojis and a simple, "Anytime, dear." As dusk crept across the windows, I let myself be present, not perfect, not vindicated, just here, in this moment, with the world's noise fading to a distant hum. Tomorrow, I'd decide whether to open Adam's letter. Tonight, I chose quiet over chaos. Sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is not defend your reputation, but nurture your spirit. Some stories aren't for public consumption, they're for healing, in the privacy of your own heart. Adam's letter sat on the kitchen counter for days, right where I dropped it, sandwiched between a stack of utility bills and a grocery flyer. Each morning, I'd see it there, my brother's neat block letters, the only part of him that still felt familiar, and promise myself I'd open it. By evening, it was easier to just walk by, busying my hands with dishes or emails, pretending I didn't care what he had to say. The city outside carried on in its springtime rhythm, neighbors watering flower beds, the distant grind of a garbage truck, the whir of bikes on the street below. Inside, I moved more slowly. I made tea, let it steep until lukewarm, turned pages in a book without reading. I wasn't angry, not exactly, more like suspended, hovering in the quiet between what had been broken and whatever came next. When I was little, Adam and I used to promise we'd always have each other's back. We whispered it during thunderstorms, shared secrets in the treehouse Dad built, swore we'd never let anyone come between us. For years, I believed him, believed us, until life chipped away at the fantasy, until the family's fault lines split us open. Even now, the lie stung as much as the truth. On the fourth day, I found myself standing in the kitchen at dusk, the letter in my hands. The city hummed below, golden light filtering through the window. My hands shook as I broke the seal. Adam's handwriting was as steady as ever, engineer's print, practical, almost stubbornly neat. He didn't waste words. The first paragraph was apology, no excuses, just an admission of guilt for not speaking up, for sitting silently at every dinner, every confrontation, when he should have had my back. He wrote about the pressure, how Mom and Dad had made it clear he was supposed to set an example. Being the golden child isn't what you think, he wrote. It means carrying their dreams and your own doubts at the same time. Sometimes I didn't know which voice was mine, or if I even had one left. Adam confessed his jealousy, the way he'd resented me for leaving, for building a life that didn't need anyone's permission. He envied my independence, but was too proud to admit it. There were memories he listed, little ones I thought only I remembered, playing cards under the dining table during holiday parties, sneaking out to buy ice cream when we were both supposed to be grounded, covering for each other's mistakes. I wish I'd done better, he wrote near the end. Not for the family's sake, but for you. I know this doesn't fix anything. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I just wanted you to know that I see you now, even if I looked away for too long. There was no signature, just a final line. Take care of yourself, Ev. That's what I should have said a long time ago. I sat at the table, the letter trembling in my lap. It wasn't a request for absolution. It was, in its way, a letting go of the old roles, the old loyalties. I felt grief, yes, for what we'd lost, but also for what we'd never really had, the kind of honesty that might have saved us both. Tears came then, silent at first, then shaking my shoulders in quiet waves. They weren't the raw, angry sobs of betrayal, but something slower and heavier, a release. I grieved the boy who'd promised to always have my back, and the woman I'd become by learning to stand alone. For a while, I let myself mourn both. After a time, I reached for pen and paper. I wrote Adam a reply, pages and pages of memories, confessions, questions I'd never voiced aloud. I wrote about the ache of being invisible, about the anger I'd carried like armor, about the nights I'd wondered if I was the villain in someone else's story. I thanked him for his honesty and wished him peace. I wrote it all, then folded the letter, slid it into an envelope, and tucked it into a drawer. Some things are meant to be said, even if they're never sent. The doorbell rang just as I'd wiped my eyes. Gladys, bearing a loaf of still warm bread, smiled when I opened the door. She didn't ask questions, just pressed the bread into my hands and ushered me to the kitchen, where she set out butter and talked about her roses blooming for the first time in years. Her chatter filled the space, soothing as a lullaby. Later, when the apartment was quiet again, I started a new journal, a small, linen-bound notebook I'd bought months ago but never used. On the first page, I wrote in careful script, things I owe only to myself. Beneath it, I listed patience, grace, space to heal, permission to grieve and move forward at my own pace. I set Adam's letter on a shelf, not as a scar, but as a record. Proof that some things can be mourned and still left behind. That forgiveness doesn't always mean reunion, and love, however flawed, can be released without being forgotten. For the first time in a long while, I closed my eyes and let the quiet settle, a small piece blooming in the space grief had carved out. The city hummed below, unchanged, but I was changing, one unwritten letter, one gentle step at a time. A knock at my door, a soft, familiar rhythm, jolted me out of my morning routine. I set down my mug and peered through the peephole. It was Sam, suit jacket over one arm, a folder of documents tucked under the other. I opened the door and let him in, the scent of spring rain trailing after him. He didn't bother with small talk. Instead, he laid the folder on my dining table and gave me a gentle, knowing look. It's all here, he said quietly, flipping open the top sheet. The sale closed this morning. The proceeds are in your account, and the deed, well, it's no longer a weight you need to carry. I slid into the chair across from him, hands folded in my lap. He reviewed every page with me, explaining each clause, each signature line. I remembered another time, years ago, signing over the last of my savings to keep the Rowe family home out of foreclosure. My parents never thanked me directly. It was just another sacrifice swept into the silence between us. But today, as I signed the final documents, my hand didn't shake. I felt relief, not triumph, not vindication, just relief. Sam stacked the paperwork, slipping it into a courier envelope. You did the hard thing, he said softly, and you did it with dignity. I tried to find words, something to capture the strange, quiet ending of a story that had once filled my whole world with noise. Instead, I simply nodded. Later, I found myself driving through the old neighborhood. I hadn't planned to visit the row house, but the car seemed to guide itself down those familiar streets. The dogwood trees lining the block were in bloom, scattering petals across sidewalks where I'd once raced Adam on battered bicycles. I parked at the curb and sat for a long moment, watching the light shift across the faded shutters. The house was already empty, no moving vans, no voices. The porch swing still creaked in the wind. I let myself in with Sam's spare key, my footsteps echoing in the hollow entryway. Every room was stripped bare. The kitchen, once filled with the scent of pecan pie and Sunday roast, was silent and still, sunlight spilling across the tiled floor. On the windowsill, I found a single photo, a faded snapshot of me and Adam as children, squinting into the sun, grass stains on our knees. Tucked behind the frame was a tiny glass marble, cloudy blue, the kind we used to play with for hours. Someone, Frank, maybe, had left them behind. I held the marble in my palm, feeling the smooth, familiar weight, and let the memory pass through me. There was no bitterness, just a kind of gentle nostalgia for what once was. I wandered through the house one last time, touching the cool banister, the edge of the doorframe where Dad once marked our heights in pencil. I thought I might cry, but the tears never came. Instead, I felt an unexpected peace settle over me. The anger, the regret, they'd faded, replaced by something quieter and stronger. I didn't need this place to remember who I was or to prove what I'd given. There was no need for a final confrontation, no urge to call out to the past. My parents, my siblings, they were all elsewhere, each dealing with the ending in their own way. I wished them well, quietly, and hoped they might find their own peace. There was nothing left to fight for. The accounts were settled. I left the photo and marble where I found them. Some things belonged to the house, not to me. I locked the door behind me, slipping the key into a small envelope for Sam to collect. As I walked down the front steps for the last time, I looked back only once, the house framed in the soft green of new leaves, the porch empty, but somehow inviting. Passing through the old neighborhood, I slowed at the corner where children were playing hopscotch, their laughter spilling out into the street. Mothers leaned on fences, sharing news and recipes, the kind of easy togetherness I'd always longed for but never quite had. I felt no envy, just a quiet hope for them that their stories might unfold with more kindness, less hurt. On my way home, I stopped at the post office. I'd prepared an envelope addressed to the local women's shelter, a modest check inside and a note, in honor of a new beginning. I sealed it, feeling a sense of closure I hadn't expected. Sometimes, the best way to honor your own journey is to help someone else start theirs. Back at my condo, Gladys called, inviting me over for coffee. I promised to come by after lunch. For the first time in a long while, my heart felt light as I closed the door behind me, leaving old ghosts on the other side. As the afternoon sun drifted through my window, I sat quietly, listening to the ordinary sounds of life outside, distant music, the hum of traffic, the city's heartbeat. I knew, finally, that the past had lost its hold. The account was closed. What came next was mine alone to claim. For the first time in years, I woke to sunlight spilling over my kitchen counters, the soft gold of morning making everything look freshly scrubbed. A vase of daffodils, my own small rebellion against years of bland, practical decor, sat by the window. The scent of fresh coffee curled around me. There was no hurry, no tension. Just me, in a space that finally felt like it belonged to me alone. I took my time that morning, toast with honey, the gentle hum of the radio, slippers warm on my feet. I didn't realize how long I'd spent living for other people's routines until I began building my own. For so long, I'd bent and twisted to fit around others' expectations, First my parents, then Adam and Becky, even colleagues and neighbors. It was only now, with the noise of the past quieted, that I felt room to ask myself what would actually make me happy. It turned out the answer was surprisingly simple. I signed up for a painting class at the community center, a whimsical impulse, after years of telling myself I had no time for hobbies. The first evening, I stood in front of a blank canvas, the smell of acrylics sharp and clean. Other students chatted about their gardens and grandkids. The instructor, a cheerful woman named Bonnie, showed us how to blend blues and greens until the edges blurred softly, like sunlight through leaves. My first effort was clumsy, but the freedom of making a mess, just for myself, was more satisfying than I'd ever expected. The next weekend, I joined a handful of neighbors at the community garden, hands plunged into warm earth, sweat beating at my temples. There was something healing about watching seedlings push their way toward the sun, about sharing a patch of land with strangers who became friends over the slow business of weeding and watering. Someone handed me a basket of cherry tomatoes and smiled. First harvest is always sweetest. At home, I began inviting color in. Throw pillows in bright orange, a patchwork quilt Gladys gifted me, sunflowers in a blue glass jug. I lingered over library books, tried new recipes, let myself listen to music in the evenings, the notes swirling through open windows. I slept better, deeper, not because every worry had vanished, but because I was no longer waiting for the next storm. Gladys, ever the generous soul, invited me to dinner at her kitchen table. We shared baked chicken, roasted potatoes, and the kind of laughter that warms a room. She regaled me with stories of her first job, her late husband's wild schemes, her daughter's antics on summer road trips. I told her about the art class, about the garden, about how strange and wonderful it felt to feel settled, if only for an evening. A postcard arrived from Becky, a quick note, the handwriting slanted, but familiar. Thinking of you. Hope you're well. B. No apology, no explanation, just a small offering of peace. I tacked it to the fridge, beside a recipe card from Gladys and a watercolor sketch from art class. It struck me, in that moment, that sometimes healing doesn't look like grand reconciliations, but like gentle ripples, small gestures, quiet understandings, letting go. One day, the head librarian asked if I'd consider hosting a book club in my apartment. My first instinct was to deflect, "Oh, I'm not really a hostess," but the words felt like someone else's, an old habit. Instead, I smiled and said yes. The evening of the first meeting, I set out a tray of cookies, brewed 2 pots of tea, and watched as neighbors, some I knew, others I didn't, filtered in, filling the space with conversation and laughter. We discussed the novel for a while, but mostly we talked about life, favorite childhood games, recipes gone wrong, trips we wanted to take. Someone mentioned family, how complicated it can be, and everyone nodded, a quiet current of understanding running around the room. By the end of the night, no one wanted to leave. I realized, as the last mug was rinsed and the chairs pushed in, that I hadn't once thought about approval or judgment. I was simply present, enough, just as I was. As everyone gathered their coats, I raised my glass and offered a toast to new roots and loving the family we choose. Laughter bubbled up, genuine and warm, and I felt a tide of gratitude rise in my chest. This home, these friendships, the slow rebuilding of trust in myself, they weren't a consolation prize. They were the life I'd made, piece by piece, after the storm. That night, lying in bed, I let the contentment settle deep into my bones. For the first time, I wasn't waiting for someone else to shape my days. The future felt open, Hopeful not because everything was fixed, but because I was finally free to begin again. Sunday morning arrives, slow and golden, sunlight dappling the kitchen table where I set out coffee and a plate of scones I'd baked the night before. The condo is filled with a gentle hush, the kind of quiet I once would have called loneliness, but now feels like a soft shawl around my shoulders. Outside, birds chatter in the courtyard trees. Somewhere far off, a church bell rings, mingling with the distant hum of the city. For the first time, I don't feel pressed to fill the silence. I simply let it be. I linger over breakfast, savoring the ritual. My phone vibrates with small signs of connection. A cheerful text from Gladys, brunch next week, my place. A meme from Sam about gardening mishaps, a group thread from the book club, last night's laughter echoing in exclamation points and emojis. There's an invitation to join a walking tour of the historic district. I reply to each in my own time, unhurried, grateful for the gentle web of belonging I've begun to spin. Later, I walk through the sunlit condo, tidying a stack of magazines, folding a blanket, pausing to water the daffodils on the windowsill. Each object in this space has been chosen by me, for me. There's a freedom in that, a sense of agency that still feels both new and natural. I open the top drawer of my sideboard, finding the old family photo Frank left behind, Adam's letter, a faded birthday card from Becky, and the blue marble I'd pocketed at the empty row house. I place them together in a small wooden keepsake box, not to bury the past, but to honor it. These fragments of another life are still part of my story, but they no longer hold the power to wound. For a moment, I sit quietly with the box in my lap, letting memories rise and settle. There's sadness there, of course there is, but it's softer now, not the sharp ache it once was. I think of the years spent holding my breath, shrinking myself to fit the shape of other people's hopes and disappointments. I think of the day I finally chose myself, even when it meant losing what I thought I couldn't live without. I open my laptop, log into a quiet online forum for adults navigating family estrangement. There, amid stories both heartbreaking and hopeful, I type a short message: your peace is worth protecting. Home isn't always where you began. Sometimes it's what you choose day by day. Be gentle with yourself. I close the tab, hoping the words find someone who needs them. Mid-morning, I host a small, impromptu brunch for the book club friends. There's laughter and clinking cups, sunlight catching on glasses of orange juice, the scent of cinnamon and fruit. We talk about recipes and upcoming events, someone's niece graduating, someone else's plans for a vacation. The conversation drifts easily, free of expectation. When they leave, the quiet returns, but it's a comfort, not an absence. After the guests are gone, I step out onto the balcony, letting the breeze ruffle my hair. I watch children ride bikes down the block, neighbors chat as they tend flower beds, the city's song rising and falling in the background. I breathe in the warm air, feeling utterly at home, not because everything is perfect, but because this space, this life, is truly mine. I send a thank you text to Gladys, and she replies with a string of heart emojis and a recipe for lemon bars. Later, I sit down at the kitchen table, journal open, and write. Today, I am enough. This peace, this belonging, I've earned it. The words feel true, settled, solid. They fill the quiet, but don't crowd it. As the afternoon fades, I brew one last cup of tea, settle in by the window, and let my eyes drift closed for a few moments. The gentle hush of my home, the slow rhythm of my breath, the knowledge that I am safe, seen, and whole, these are gifts I could not have imagined at the story's start. I know now that my journey was never just about losing a family or winning some silent war. It was about coming home to myself, about building a life where I am welcome, just as I am. For so long, I feared that silence meant emptiness. Today, I understand. Silence can be a blessing, a space for hope and for new beginnings. May we all find the courage to build our own quiet homes wherever life takes us. I close my eyes, the sunlight warm on my face, and let the stillness settle in. This peace is mine, and I've earned it. Hello, friends. I'm Evelyn, the voice behind the story, and perhaps someone not so different from you. Thank you for walking beside me through each page, each quiet struggle, and each hard-won moment of peace. Looking back on this journey, I realize it wasn't just about losing a house or facing family conflict. It was about finding the courage to stand up for my own worth, even when it meant letting go of people I once called home. What moved me most, and what I hope lingers with you, is the reminder that we all deserve spaces, both in our hearts and in our lives, where we feel safe, seen, and loved for who we truly are. Life has a way of teaching us that not every story ends with a perfect reconciliation. Sometimes, healing means setting boundaries and building new beginnings from the ground up. Through every disappointment, I discovered something lasting. Kindness to ourselves matters just as much as kindness to others. Choosing peace doesn't mean closing the door on love. It means opening the window for hope and growth. And you, have you ever felt invisible in your own family or faced a moment when you had to choose yourself? How did you find your way through? I would love to hear your thoughts and stories. Please share them in the comments below. If this story reminded you of your own journey or simply touched your heart, leave a comment with the number 1 or let me know where you're listening from. Let's remind each other that none of us are truly alone on the path to finding home. If you appreciate gentle stories about real-life struggles and quiet triumphs, I'd be honored if you'd subscribe or follow the channel. Your support helps us continue sharing stories that matter. Thank you for staying with me to the very end. Your presence means more than you know. Wishing you warmth, resilience, and the gentle courage to build a home within yourself, wherever life takes you. Until we meet again, take care, and remember, your peace is worth protecting.